time for the weekend. I'm Dave Morris here in the Oklahoman's video studio looking at the stories that we reported on throughout this week. It's a weekend review episode and looking ahead to the stories that we'll be reporting this weekend. I'm joined by Tim Willert, education reporter. We have sports editor Ryan Sharp and managing editor Don Mecoy. Gentlemen, good morning and thank you very much for your time. Tim, I'll start with you. One of the bigger stories of this week was you were covering community meetings over the past couple of weeks, which involved Oklahoma City Schools Superintendent Sean McDaniel, about the Pathways to Greatness.
Yeah, it's a project where they've got a lot of empty classrooms in the district, and they're looking for some way to make efficient use of them. Some of them are going to be closed, some are going to be repurposed. And what Sean's been doing all of last week and part of the previous week was let the community know how the process is going to work and what he hopes to do. And he's hoping to reinvest the money that they're going to save by closing some of these buildings into reinvest back into schools, particularly those in like the northeast section of the city that, you know, they've had budget cuts, have eliminated art programs and music programs and counselors and after-school programs. It's
got to be a tough conversation to have, right? Because parents are interested in what class sizes, teachers and principals are interested in job security.
Yeah, and you know what? Right now there's not a whole lot of detail. That's going to happen in a couple of months when after all the data is collected, it has been collected, but after they've come up with some proposals, they're going to have another series of community meetings. So that's when it's going to get probably a little nasty, because they're going to know which schools are going to be closed, which schools are going to be repurposed. Some schools in the south that are overcrowded are probably going to get, you know, a new building, perhaps. But yeah, right now it's a little up in the air, and people are worried about the future of their schools.
You've been to these community meetings. What's been the vibe at these meetings?
Well, the first one at Star Spencer, a community in northeast Oklahoma City that has been targeted for closure before. So that was a raucous meeting. And then the last meeting at Douglas High on I believe that was Monday night. That one got a little heated too, because these are folks in the northeast section of the city that feel like the district has really shortchanged them in the past, and they've had some schools targeted for closure as well. They just don't feel like they can trust the cities or the school district. So they had a lot of folks, even though Sean's trying to tell them, I don't have, Sean McDaniel, the superintendent's trying to tell them, I don't have a list of schools we're going to close, we're going to look at the data, we need your input. They still don't believe him because of the way they feel like the district's treated them in the past.
It's interesting stuff. It's a topic that Tim Willert has been following throughout the school year and will continue to follow throughout the school year. And speaking of schools, you're working on a story this morning that involves macaroni and cheese.
That's right. There's a teacher over at Capitol Hill Elementary. Her name's Kathleen, and her husband, they own a food truck. It's called Yum Pig. And what they decided to do was donate 50 cents from every sale of the Cowboy, which is a very popular sandwich of theirs. It's pulled pork and macaroni and cheese.
Sounds fantastic.
And they raised like $650, and they bought books for every one of the 550 plus students at the school, which is Capitol Hill Elementary in South Oklahoma City. They have a high percentage of English language learners, and so they're a little behind when it comes to reading. So they're trying to do whatever they can to get these kids on track.
Interesting, and a good story there.
Yeah, thanks.
Speaking of Capitol Hill, we'll move over to Ryan Sharp and former student Alex Saucedo in action over at Chesapeake Energy Arena. We're hours away, we think, from Ding Ding the Bell. Alex Saucedo going against Maurice Hooker for the, I believe, WBO 150-pound world title.
Yeah, so Saucedo fought a few months ago here in Oklahoma City, and it was really the first time in a long time that we've had a major fight here in Oklahoma City, and it's at the biggest arena, and they sold the thing out. It was packed. It was an awesome environment. One of the fights of the year, according to some of the folks that follow such things. A really bloody match that was a lot of fun to watch. So now we've got a world title fight here in Oklahoma City tonight. I say tonight, it should start around 11:15. We'll see. It's a big undercard, so it might start a little bit late, but so we've been telling stories with Saucedo all week long, from a teacher that really got him going in school and kind of helped him learn English when he was young, to his dad, who's one of his cornermen in today's paper. So we've had a good run of stories, and we'll have another good run this weekend.
It's been interesting to see the community rally behind him. There's, I believe, an elementary school on the south side. I saw on their display outside the building, you know, "Go Alex Saucedo, we're rooting for you." So it'll be interesting to see how the community turns out in the arena.
It will, and it's interesting too because he's fighting Maurice Hooker, who the last title fight that he had was against a guy from England, and he fought him in England. So it's the second straight fight that this guy's been in that he's fighting a challenger on their home turf. Maurice is from Dallas, so it's close. So there's some Oklahoma, Texas things that have brewed up there, but it should be a great atmosphere and a good fight too.
You can watch that on ESPN. If you're not at the arena, I believe tickets start around $35 for the fight there. And again, fights start around 5 o'clock, and the ESPN telecast kicks off around 11 p.m.
That's right.
Don, we'll bring you in at this point. Among the big stories of the week, oil prices, and I think this is something you guys are working on perhaps for the weekend, but that affects multiple things, ultimately gas prices as well.
Yeah, gasoline prices, but it has an even bigger impact on the Oklahoma economy in general because energy is such a big part of that. Our energy writer, Jack Money, has written a story that we're going to run Sunday that kind of takes a big, wide view of what's going on. In the last several weeks, oil prices, which had been higher than expected, had gone up above $70 a barrel, have fallen about 20%, which is officially a bear market for oil. And in the midst of that, all of our local companies reported their earnings, which were still very good for the most part, because that oil was generally sold into the market before the prices slipped. But he points out, you know, how it affects job creation, how it affects state revenue with taxation and various things. But it's not a sky is falling scenario because a lot of these companies, they're still even with the price decline, they're still able to be profitable at these levels. And also they have, a lot of them have forward sales contracts where they're protected from if the price continues to fall and falls off a cliff, they're going to still be able to sell the oil at a price higher than the spot price because they've got these contracts. So it's very interesting to look at that, and he looks at a lot of things. But yeah, one of the things we found out, gasoline prices at some places in Oklahoma City are less than $2 a gallon now. So that's something we have not seen in a while.
Which will impact those of us who may be traveling over the holiday weekend as well.
That's right.
There was an interesting story Jack had earlier this week. One of the court decisions affected the local oil companies as well.
Yeah, in Kingfisher County, there was a kind of a dispute between the county commissioners and the oil companies that were working there. And there's a lot of drilling going on in Kingfisher County. And the oil companies will run hoses, lines through county right-of-way. There's basically in these bar ditches along the road. And they move the water that is produced. This is this brackish water that comes up when they drill, and also what they bring back after they frack a well. So they have to move a lot of water. Well, the county said, you can't do that. You can't put it in our bar ditches because we have too much liability. The oil companies came back and said, hey, you know, you don't regulate us. We're regulated by the State Corporation Commission. And just this week, the State Supreme Court sided with the oil companies and said, yes, only the Oklahoma Corporation Commission can tell them that they can't put their lines there. So they're back in business.
And Jack did a nice job late at night on deadline of knocking out a pretty detailed story.
Yeah, we don't often see Supreme Court decisions come down like 7:30 at night, but yeah, Jack scrambled on that one, and we had it in the next day's paper, and got responses from both sides, and it was an issue we'd been following for quite some time, so that was an important decision for Kingfisher County.
Good stuff. All right, the Thunder's playing well these days.
Yeah, 9-1 over the last 10. If I'd have said 2 or 3 weeks ago, when they started out 0-4, that they'd be 2 games out of first place in the West and a game out in the division, would you believe me?
Well, especially if you would have said also Westbrook would have been injured.
Yeah, so he's missed the last couple of games. Probably, I mean, could miss another couple more. Who knows? He's been practicing, but not going through full contact stuff. The benefit they've got is Paul George is playing out of his mind.
Which is why you have Paul George.
Yeah, and so he looks to me like he did before he got hurt with Indiana. He talked the other night about he had a couple of dunks in the game, and you don't really think about it, but that's really the first time that he's had major, like, powerful dunks like that in a long time. And he said he's finally feeling healthy, and he said it was nice to play above the rim again, which is shocking to me that a guy that's that good, you would assume dunks all the time, but doesn't really. And it's because he's been still trying to work his way back from a really horrific knee injury several years ago. And so that's the benefit they've got. They got guys like Dennis Schroeder who's playing really well in Westbrook's absence. You got role players and Abrinas and Patterson, guys that are making shots now. It's a lot different looking team than it was 3 weeks ago. And again, like I said, they're 9-1 in their last 10 games. They've got an interesting road trip coming up. They're on the West Coast, and they got Sacramento, Golden State, who has their own bevy of issues over the last few days.
But it's fun to watch.
It is fun to watch. It's a little bit of a train wreck, but it's one of those things where you can't look away from it. So it might be a perfect chance for Oklahoma City to go in there and steal a game in Golden State, which down the road may help them out some.
Houston did that last night.
They did.
We also have OU and OSU playing this weekend. Senior day, Les Miles to Kansas. Is this going to happen?
Hey, listen, LSU and Les Miles agreed on a settlement yesterday, which frees him up of any contractual deals with LSU. There's been all kinds of reports of planes going from Lawrence, Kansas to Baton Rouge. So sign me up. I'm all on board for the hat to be back in the Big 12.
All right, good stuff. You can find all sorts of college football updates and stories online Saturday as the games happen, as well as the Thunder game, I believe, Saturday night as well. Gentlemen, thank you very much for your time. You can find these stories and more in upcoming editions of the Oklahoman, and of course, online at newsok.com. Have a great weekend, everyone.